Hello and welcome to Two Therapists and a Microphone. I am Dr. Harrison Davis.
And I'm Dr. Aisha Dickerson.
Two Therapists and a Microphone is a show about mental health, relationships, and social issues that personally affect you. We broadcast live every Thursday evening at 7 o'clock p.m. now on the Our Black Media Network.
Harrison and I are two licensed psychotherapists with decades of clinical experience, and we want to hear from you. Tell us about your situations or dilemmas that you're going through. You can send us questions at www.twotherapist.com and click on Ask Two Therapists at the top, a little bit to the right.
Absolutely. And we're getting those questions in. We're thank you for that. But tonight we're going to talk about a serious topic, and we have two amazing guests here on the show tonight. We're going to talk about racial and gun violence here in our country, as it feels like we are in a season of violence right now, particularly the last 6 months here in the United States. I'm going to give you guys some statistics to think about. So far in the first 6 months of the year, we've had 250 mass murders. One just happened today in northern Maryland, Smithsburg, Maryland. I believe 3 people are dead. The details are still coming out. With those 250 mass shootings, we've had almost 1,400 people shot just in 6 months. And of that, 278 are dead. Now, some of us are aware of the more recent mass shootings that took place in Uvalde in an elementary school, the grocery store in Buffalo, Maryland, where the shooter was targeting Black people. And also there was the Taiwanese church out in California. But there are many more that have been taking place, whether it's a graduation party, a club, a bar, or a shopping mall. Many of us are left feeling a little bit unsafe these days. And in particular, in the Black community, we're having to deal with being the victims of this gun violence a little bit more than other individuals. As I read off some of those statistics, Aisha, what came to mind with you? How do you feel about all that?
I mean, I can admittedly say I'm just terrified. I
Yeah,
love the things that I have in my house. I keep adding things to my house so that I can stay in my house. And I also have protection in my house.
I know
I'm
you do.
afraid I'm afraid every time my children leave.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't even gotten groceries in over a month since the grocery shooting. I'm trying to figure out how I could order them online and roll up and get
Instacart.
stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, you can do that. Yeah, so many people feel the same way. I'm more concerned about my daughter, going out after the school shooting, in Uvalde, as I realize there are people out there who are not afraid to put a bullet in the head of a 10-year-old girl, including all of her classmates and a couple of teachers. That is scary. And many times we are the victim, as we talked about the Buffalo shooting and many others that are out there, regardless of who's pulling the trigger. It seems like we're always getting the bullet. So, very quickly, some final statistics I want to read out to you guys. The CDC just released some statistics from a year ago. The number one cause of death for Black males under the age of 19 is homicide. The number one cause of death for Black males between 20 and 44 is homicide. And it goes down as you grow older. For Black females under the age of 19, the number two cause of death will be homicides. And Black females between the age of 20 and 44, the number four cause of death happens to be homicide. This is something that greatly affects the Black community, urban areas as well. And we're going to talk about it today with two amazing guests. I am happy to have on the program tonight two presidents of some premier counseling mental health organizations here in the country. And they're going to talk to you about some of these issues and give us some resources that are out there. So Aisha is going to introduce the first one for us.
I sure will. Our first, excuse me, is Dr. S. Kent Butler Jr. He is a professor of counselor education at the University of Central Florida. Dr. Butler presently serves as president of the American Counseling Association 2021 through 2022 and is an ACA fellow. He has served the Association for Multicultural Counseling and Development as president, ACA Governing Council representative, and is a proud member of AMCD's Multicultural Counseling Competencies Revisions Committee, which produced the Multicultural Social Justice Counseling Competencies. Dr. Butler formerly served the University of Central Florida as the interim chief equity, inclusion, and diversity officer, and is a National Association for Chief Diversity Officer and Higher Education Fellow. He has also served as a faculty fellow for inclusive excellence within the university's Office of the Provost. Dr. Butler is a faculty advisor to Chi Sigma Iota, Counselor Education Doctoral Student Organization, Project for Haiti Nights, and the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Welcome, Dr. Butler.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Appreciate being here.
Got all those amazing credentials there. I want to hire you.
Me
So
too.
we also have another guest on the show, a very good friend of mine, including Dr. Butler. I think I've known both of you for like over 20 years, but Dr. Beverly Smith is the president and interim CEO of the American Mental Health Counselors Association, the only organization in the nation exclusively representing clinical mental health counselors. Key initiatives of her tenure include establishing a multiculturalism and social justice task force and the Counseling Compact Task Force. She is also the owner of B. Smith Consulting Group, LLC, an adjunct professor of counseling, and she's committed to public service. Dr. Smith was recently recognized by the state of Georgia for her local and national work with the mental healthcare advocacy. Welcome to the show, Dr. Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
So the first question I want to ask you guys, and I gave you guys a lot of statistics that are out there, and you're watching the same things that we're watching. Watching news, just your local news. The first 10 minutes, all I hear about are shootings and murders that are taking place. But as you reflect on the first 6 months of this year, what are your thoughts and feelings about the violence we are experiencing within our country? Let's start with you, Dr. Smith.
When I think about the past 6 months, honestly, I think about the tragedies that have occurred. And there, in many cases, I'm still a human being. So did anger flush through me? Absolutely. Because I don't want to see anyone shot down. I don't see anyone killed. I don't want any mother or father or families to actually go through those tragedies that we've gone through. And unfortunately, if we stay in a reactive mode, we'll continue to go through and cycle through these tragedies. And that's unfortunate. But this was the next time. Today was a mass shooting or shootings that occurred. We talk about the shootings in Uvalde in Texas and Buffalo, New York, as well as in Maryland, California. And so we keep operating as if the beat goes on. But at some point, we have to pause and stop and examine what are the root causes. And then let's deal with those root causes. I'm a human being. I'm a clinical professor of clinical mental health counseling. I am a practitioner, but I'm also a human being who respect the rights of individuals, who respect the lives of individuals. And so, yeah, angry, upset, I've gone through that. And those are human and normal emotions that we all possibly have gone through. But the difference is not acting on those anger or those emotions to the point that they would impact or hurt someone. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
Those individuals who were killed, I think they were senseless shootings and killings that just didn't have to happen. Period.
I agree. Dr. Butler, as you reflect on the last 6 months, what thoughts and feelings do you have about the violence that we're all experiencing in our country?
I think the very first thing I can really speak to is how frightening it is to just be leaving your home and just living life, because you never know. I was thinking about what I would share with you all today, and the thing that comes to mind is you often hear people say, "I can't believe that this happened in my community."
Yeah.
We can't say that any longer. I think all our communities are at risk of having this type of thing happen. And so when you walk into a store or you walk into a school or you're just driving down the street. You just never know if a stray bullet is going to be coming your way because somebody feels that they have a right to do that. You know, when I think about the young person who was bullied and felt that there was no other way, I kept trying to wrap my head around why would you go into a school and just gun down young people? But his mind may not have been right in terms of the fact that he was just attributing his pain to when he was in school and being bullied, and goes and he bullies and in a sense is striking back at people. Dr. Smith just spoke about senseless killings. Go and gun down young people who had nothing to do with maybe the trauma you were experiencing when you were younger, and now they and the families that they are leaving behind have to deal with the aftermath of it.
Yeah.
And so I think about that. You spoke about your daughter leaving. You know, Uvalde happened the day before my daughter's last day of school.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, the day before, the day of, she was so excited about going to school. She was going to get her yearbook signed, and all these things were going to be happening. And, you know, she was 9 years old. She just turned 10 today, actually. Today is her 10th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And all I could think about, I didn't want to share it with her because I didn't want her to be distraught or worried and have anxiety, because he's already having that because of the pandemic and everything else that's going on in the world. And I was like, do I want to send my daughter to school on the last day of school? Now, conscious, I was like, you know, she'll probably be safe, right? There won't be anything that I have to worry about. But should any parent have to ever deal with that and go through that, that they're worried about sending their children out to any type of environment? And so those are the types of things that have been coming up for me the past 6 months.
And so
And I agree with everything
sorry,
Dr.
Go ahead, Dr.
No, I
Smith.
agree with everything Dr. Butler said. I agree with what Dr. Butler said. I want to add to something, kind of bridge to what Dr. Dickinson said. The fear that it has created. And that's just in the real world now. People fear. Now, if I leave my home, will my child get injured? Will I get shot?
Mm-hmm.
And those are real fears that are there. But we shouldn't have to live this way.
So I was also afraid of sending my child to school right after that. And I have to admit, I did not tell her anything about it. We don't watch
Yeah.
the news in my house. We're not like my parents, they just leave the news running all day. But so she went to school not knowing anything about it. I even excuse me, more didn't want her to be anxious because at the middle school where she is, when my oldest child was at that middle school, one of her classmates stabbed the teacher for no real reason except that he always wanted to kill someone. That's when she was in the 8th grade. So she already has that thought in her mind going into that middle school, and all of the other children who had siblings who were at the school at that time. I just did not want to put that fear on her, but it made me fearful. I imagine myself
Mm-hmm.
being like that mother who,
Yep.
jumped over the fence and went and got
Yep.
her kids. When the stabbing happened, I just so happened to be at the school, and I was ready to take someone down if it had been a gun. So I get that.
Yeah. And so, Dr. Butler, you talked about, the killer in Uvalde, and how he may have been bullied. You talked about that. But what I want us to talk about now, possibly, what motivates someone to go out and gun down, hunt, and shoot innocent individuals, even someone who was bullied and victimized as a kid, and there are others who were not. And I ask you too, also, Dr. Smith, from your clinical viewpoint, what's going on with those individuals? What can motivate someone to do that?
Hate. I think bottom line is hate and fear. I think we have been very undermined in our country by people who are in power, who are living in the dominant culture, so to speak, who believe that, you know, they don't do anything that errs, that is wrong. And so you have people who are hating people who they don't even know for
Yeah.
no other reason other than the fact that somebody is telling a falsehood about them. You have people who are in fear of their environment, their home, their surroundings, losing something that they don't even have most of the time, because somebody has instilled in them that somebody is trying to take something away from them. And so I often think back to, when you first said that, I was like, how do I weave this in? I think this Make America Great Again is a part of this. It's about, and I see it as hatred. I see it as people trying to take something back that was never theirs in the first place. And they are doing all these things to try to right the ship for them, or what they think is righting the ship. And in some sense, I often think, if you really want out of this, then hurt yourself. And I don't condone that, because I don't want anybody going around hurting themselves. But why would you decide to take out 19 children because you're
Right.
unhappy? If you're unhappy, we fine. Go
Yeah,
be
those 19
unhappy.
kids were just fine.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said it, because I've said things like that before, and people are like, "What?" No, I'm not saying anyone should
Nobody
resort
should do
to
it.
suicide,
No one's
but
advocating
if you're
suicide.
going to
One versus
kill other
19.
people, right? If it's so bad, please just
Yeah,
let
but I,
these people live.
I've often said this, right? I've never want to be in a space where I'm that angry that I do something, because most of the times that's a spur of the moment thing. But what I'm finding is some of these people who are out here doing this with manifestos and
they
they've
planned it for
been planning this
months.
stuff for months, right? If you are that unhappy,
Yeah, I hear
let's
you.
come
I hear you.
denominator there.
Yeah, I don't believe any of us are advocating suicide, but what I hear you
Oh, I'm not
saying,
advocating suicide, but I'm
yeah,
saying you need to
if you're
think about it.
yeah, if you're that unhappy, that miserable, and have some pent up anger, why take it out on some innocent individuals, either some elderly black folks doing some grocery shopping, or
Right.
19-year or 9-year-old girls and boys
For
within the
15 minutes of
classroom?
fame.
Yeah, leave them alone,
Leave them
and
alone.
do that to yourself. So,
Right.
Dr. Smith, as you hear about that, and we heard from Dr. Butler, what are your thoughts about what motivates these individuals to go out there? And I said it earlier because I want to be brutally honest. Put a bullet in a 9-year-old girl's head and all her
So that she's
classmates.
unrecognizable.
Yes,
Right. I
unrecognizable.
saw
Yeah,
that on the news yesterday. The one time I watched the news, because you
So
all
you
maybe
just
give me
that's
more.
some serious hate
that
Yeah.
right
is,
there, to shoot somebody in their face so that their parents and anybody else cannot even recognize who they are.
Dr. Smith.
I agree with Dr. Butler. I agree with what you all are saying. First, we don't advocate suicidal, and I know that was not the message, but you just
Yeah,
want to reiterate that
I just want to
piece.
clear that up for you.
Yeah, and so, but what I do agree with is the hatred piece, but not only a hatred for the other people, individuals of that magnitude who will go out and murder babies like that, then there's a certain amount of hate that they have for themselves. And so often we don't talk about how did an individual get to a place of self-hatred.
Right.
And so we have to unpack that and also look back into the childhood, what happened. And I'm not saying there's something that happened in the childhood, but oftentimes when a child has been exposed to trauma, been mistreated, hurted, all that stuff that was wrong, then it can manifest when they get older. It can manifest in them hurting other people. And we see that. That doesn't give an excuse for anyone to hurt anyone. Okay. Because I think, at a certain point, everyone kind of knows, hey, this was right, this was wrong. I can pause, but everyone can also reach out for help. Okay. There may be stigmas around mental health, so on and so forth, but nevertheless, it's different than, throwing some trash on the ground or looking at someone cross eyes, or we would say with the side eye. That's different than going and killing and murdering someone, So we have to look at what happened in his childhood that taught him, that cultivate that spirit of anger and hate for himself and then other people.
So what I've seen a lot on social media is that there is the question of how much of this can actually be attributed to mental health.
Mhm.
Like it almost feels, not almost, it's not fair to keep every time someone does something, I'm going to say evil, I'm going to use the word evil, that it goes into people saying, oh, mental health, and oh, they were struggling here and trauma there. How much of it can actually be mental health? At what point do we say it's anything else?
Well,
It is
interesting.
something else. It's not mental health. It's the
But,
statistics don't support that.
but interesting. All of us have mental health. It just depends on where we are on the spectrum. So we have to, kind of say, okay, it wasn't a healthy decision. It wasn't good mental health, but all of us have mental health. It just depends on where we're on the spectrum. We are definitely not on that spectrum where we are going out killing and hurting other folks. And I think in order to do that, there is a mental dysfunction there
Okay.
for you to think or operate as if it's okay.
I actually think that it's a distraction to talk about mental health when you talk about people going out and doing this. Now, I again, it goes back to what I was saying before. I think people are fearful for whatever reasons in their brains that somebody is out to get them, or the government's out to get them, or this particular group of people are out to get them. So I'm going to right the wrong. I'm going to right the ship, so to speak,
Mhm.
and kill these individuals. There's hatred that makes people go out and do these types of things. I think it's a distraction to say that it's because they are suffering from some type of mental wellness issues. And so what happens is, while we're standing here thinking about this and being distracted by this, people are still going out buying guns. People are
Mhm.
still going out and getting licenses at a young age. And all
18.
these things are things that we should be talking about and stopping, because these people are doing copycat stuff and they are doing all these other things. I refuse to tie that to mental wellness when I know that they are out there doing these things to harm other individuals. And the main reason for it is that they hate the world for whatever reasons that they hate it for.
Gotcha. I'm glad to hear you say that because we're all clinicians here. We have clients, or we've had clients in the past. I
Mhm.
just thought it was so disrespectful to all the people who are managing their out of balance mental health issues.
Right.
It is so disrespectful to people who are experiencing bipolar. They're going to therapy and they're taking the medication, but just to slap that label on them, like
Mhm.
Dr. Aisha just mentioned, can be unfair to a number of people. However, there are some studies to indicate there is a rise in the number of people who have been diagnosed with some type of mental illness just over the last 2 years. I think a
Right.
lot of that has to do with the pandemic and how it changed our lives and the kids and the anxiety and all of the violence that we continue to see on television.
Right.
So, if you guys can, I understand it is a distraction, but are there any particular signs or mental diagnoses that we should particularly be looking at to try to prevent some of these violent situations from happening?
If I had a way to market some type of a way that you can be safe, get a bubble, be isolated,
Yeah,
there's no rhyme or reason. Again, like I said, every time I walk out of my house, I don't know if somebody is going to be angry or upset and is going to be willing to have an Uzi or some kind of assault rifle and take down a whole entire city. I don't know that I have that kind of safety net. And so
mhm,
when you say something like that, again, what ties to me is like, there are, yes, are there mental wellness issues? Yes, we have to agree to that. But when you look at what's happening in other countries across the globe, some with or without these type of weapons, you don't see that same level of intensity that
I
you
agree.
see in the United States
That's
of
true.
people going out and killing individuals. And so it's so if people were really intent on hurting and harming others, it would be in so many different ways, right? You don't see a lot of people running around with swords and knives
Hmm.
and you don't see the Texas chainsaw massacre happening. You don't see all those things happen. So if people are that angry and they don't have weapons, so why? So all of a sudden, the only way you can have mental wellness issues is if you own a Uzi.
I see.
You know what I'm saying? And so you can't tie that to that. This is just people who just want to harm
Gotcha.
Well, I agree in
for a
part.
good part, not all
Yeah,
of them.
yeah, I agree in part. I think when we talk about teenagers, we talk about adolescents and children. They do what they're taught to do, what they've seen, and they do what they know to do. And so on those levels, there are some things that we can do to recognize or try or attempt to. I know we may not want to screen adolescents and children for depression, anxiety, or just do some mental wellness screening, but it may be necessary to have some universal screeners that will give us baseline information, but will also let us know when there are some shifts that are going on with individuals. You have a lot of students who are walking around here who are in schools, and they may not have the tools that we have to communicate, hey, I'm in distress, or this and that happened at home, or I've seen this person killed or murdered, or I've experienced this trauma. They don't have the words for that. But what they are doing is recording and listening to what's going on in their environment. And so if violence is going on in their environment, if they are taught hatred, then they are eventually going to behave and act out on that.
So, just to speak to that a little bit, how we change some of this, Dr. Davis, is that we actually start to do the work that's necessary to kind of heal our nation. We need to start looking at policies, and we need to start looking at ways of kind of circumventing the shift that we need to make, because we are so far off the beaten path right now. We need to have school counselors in every school, and I'm not talking just 100 to 250. I'm saying we need to have as many who need to be there helping these children get through this environment, looking for the outliers, looking for the student who's hurting, looking for the one who's bullied, look for the one who is bullying, and work with these young people so that they can be better citizens, so they can see each other and do better. We need to start doing the type of work, preventative work, that's necessary to let people see people for who they are and understand what pain is, understand what hurt is, find a way to help them find love in their life so they don't go around doing the types of things that they're doing. And in order to do that, we need to have the people who are able to do that. Counselors are so equipped to be able to do this work. Let school counselors do what school counselors do, and let them go out and work with these young people and help these young people so they can be academically successful and they can be people who are ready to go out into the world and be good citizens.
So I think that a lot of people would argue that back in the day, people were bullied, they experienced trauma, and there was still not as much gun violence. So what
Right.
is so different today that gun violence is common? Like that should go to.
There's a meme that's going around right now with Ruby.
I've seen that one.
Right, and I think that's a false equivalency, right? To have that, well, she was bullied and she didn't go out and shoot all these people up, right? I mean, because in a sense, we ain't really going out in the Black community. I'm not saying we're not doing harm, and there's not mass shootings and killings and all this other stuff. But typically, when we're bullied, we're not going around trying to kill everybody whoever might have looked at us side-eyed, right? So this meme that's going around with her that says that it ties it to it, but in the sense that we need to have a conversation about the fact that what communities of people are actually out there doing this, right? And so whether she was bullied or not, was it in her nature to go out and do something like that? No. People are trying, as much as Black people are minimalized in this world, we don't go out and on a whim and just try to hurt people just for the sake of hurting people.
Yep.
And I see other communities of people doing that.
Yeah.
So I think also that when most people think about mass shootings, they think about, young white men, even older white men doing it. But in this case, the shooting in Texas, this was a young Hispanic guy, Mexican American, I believe. So
it's never saying that there's never going to be outliers, and there's never going to be, and there's also, the fact that there
that's
are some
a good term, outlier.
whoever they are, they think sometimes that they are white.
Didn't think about that.
I'll talk about that as well.
So, Dr. Smith, you have anything to add to that?
Only thing I would add is that, first of all, mass shootings and hurting people, it's just wrong. That's it, point blank and simple. And so we again have to go back and understand what actually is hatred and what constitute that, and how do we get in a mental space of hatred. We have the mass shooting, it's wrong. We have shooting that occurs on black. We have we have shootings one-on-one or gang related shooting that occurs in certain neighborhoods every day and every night. That's still wrong as well. And so we have to go back and really begin to do work, yes, with public policy, but also do some grass work in the community as clinicians, as individuals, as public servants, to go back in the community and say, hey, we have to talk about how do we heal? How do we begin to help each other prosper and to be healthy mentally, and go from that standpoint? Oftentimes, we don't want to talk about trauma. Oftentimes, we don't want to talk about the post-traumatic slave syndrome or the impact it has on now. We just want to start now in 2022 and move forward and think it's all okay. But there's so many years of issues and experiences that have happened that have caused people to be in this place. It does not excuse killing or hurting anyone at all. But we still have to unpack and again deal with some historical issues of hatred. Deal with now, how do we heal as how do I heal as an individual? How do we collectively heal as a community and as a nation? And we do need public policy, but we need that public policy to inform mental health care. And I don't want to get all into that aspect of it, but when you talk about the Mental Health Access Improvement Act, which is in the Senate Bill 828 and HR 432, that is an act that we need to be passed so that we can, as clinical mental health counselors, as licensed mental health counselors, so that we can provide the service for those who are out here who are in need. We're in a mental health crisis.
We are.
And mass shootings are happening. And who really wants to keep enduring this over and over?
Yeah, I agree with you. But Dr. Aisha did bring up a good point. Something's going on within our culture where people are using bullying as an excuse to go out and slaughter other individuals. And I hear you guys talk about hatred. And I believe you. I'm with you on that. But the thought that just came to my head, should hatred be a mental illness? Should racism be labeled as a mental illness? If you're going to go out and target somebody simply because of their race and ethnicity or the color of their skin, and then you kill them or you harm them, why is that not a mental health diagnosis? And anybody can jump in.
I don't want to give them that. No.
Because then you could end up getting accommodations if you can label it as an illness. I call them the N-word. I got that racism.
I don't co-sign that one. No. We need to have a very serious conversation in this world about what it is to be a person and to be able to be yourself, your free self, in a world where you have a right to be. We need to have that conversation. We need to have a very difficult dialogue about why people are hating on other individuals, because somewhere in their history or somewhere within their generational lines, they've been told that they are better than. We have never dealt with that. So before we go and try to shift to some type of easy fix, Band-Aid for whatever, let's have the real conversation about why we're here in the first place. We're here because people think that they own the right to be able to live in a world that they only see themselves being in.
Yeah, I just wonder if they're listening, because we have been talking, for over a century.
Dr. Davis, we've been talking, but we have not been consistent about changing policy. We have not been consistent about saying, look, you need to be looking out for people in Black and brown communities. We are so busy getting co-opted by our message. Black Lives Matter, right? We don't even talk about what the true meaning behind Black Lives Matter is, because people try to co-opt that.
Yeah, they hijacked it. Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about critical race theory because somebody has hijacked that to try to tell people what that is. Critical race theory is just history. Mm-hmm. But they have sidetracked it so that these people who are low informational voters or getters or whatever have you, they are helping those people to hold on to something that's not even real, so that they can continue this hate.
So I want to make a shift. A
Uh-oh.
slight shift. It's not a big shift. But I do want to talk about the victims a little
Yep.
bit.
Mm.
So I want to start by asking, it's kind of broad, but what's the emotional, mental, and spiritual impact of this ongoing gun violence?
I think the ongoing gun violence and the massive shooting, all the tragedies, it puts everyone in that space of trauma. Whether you experience it vicariously, you were there, you experienced it, your family member did, secondary trauma, or you're looking at it on social media. And so we have an impact that we all at this point have experienced trauma, whether we believe it or not. And so we're trying to navigate through that space of trauma and grieving. And for a lot of people, when you still have that fear, they're frightened and just afraid to live.
I agree with you, and we got to define trauma as well. Because a lot of those things we talked about, afraid to go out the house, and our kids,
Mhm.
the grocery store, the school, and you can avoid those places if you really want to, the church. But one thing that we cannot avoid, is someone seeing us for our cultural selves. We can't
Right.
avoid our race and ethnicity, so it's sort of hard to forget that someone's targeting us just for that particular reason. And that adds to the anxiety that is out there. And I think we've all talked about how we personally experience it. But Dr. Butler, tell us more about how other people might be experiencing. What's the impact of
So
all of this
the
violence?
impact is continuous. So
Mhm.
when I think about trauma, I actually look at it from, especially in the Black community, Black and Brown communities, I see it as continuous traumatic stress disorder. Every
Mhm.
day there's an anxiety or stress that's on our lives that, that has impacted how we are able to navigate it, right? And
Define that
so
for the audience.
continuous traumatic stress disorder, very similar to post-traumatic stress disorder in terms of someone being affected by things that have happened. So post-traumatic is something you experience something that was really traumatic in your life, and you just have a relapse or something that continually reminds you of that. Like if you've been in at war and you hear gunshots or you hear somebody drop a
Mhm.
book or something along those lines, you have a flashback to a time when you might have been harmed or close to being harmed. Well, continuous traumatic stress disorder is one of those things where you, as you are moving through life, you are constantly under some type of stress or anxiety because of things that are going on, right? So me as a Black male, every time I leave my house, when I see police officers or see or hear a fire alarm or a police car go by, I have these visceral reactions to that.
Mhm.
And the more that I have those types of things, the more that they are affecting my mental wellness, my physical wellness, everything, right? I have this reaction to it. And that in terms of having those types of things happen every single day, can really have an effect on somebody's physical health.
And when we're talking about someone, who's experiencing PTSD, those individuals, they're having, as Dr. Butler mentioned, those recurrent thoughts, those intrusive thoughts of the incident of hurt, harm, or pain. And all of that affects the individual ability to think clearly, as well as to just function in everyday life. So that's part of the impact of having experienced prolonged or continuous trauma, that you can pass and be in that place of PTSD and not know it.
So I do want to touch a little bit on the differences in race. We talked about the mass shootings
Mhm.
and what most mass shooters look like. But from what I'm hearing with continuous traumatic stress disorder, it sounds like that could be something that people would experience in, for lack of better terms, the hood. When you're thinking about, someone, you hear how I said that? That sounded super
So
friendly, right? The
Well,
We
hood.
all know the
the
hood. Let's stop
Yeah,
playing.
well,
I
it
think
came from South Africa, right? So, you know, because of the things that were happening around apartheid and the things that were happening to Black people in South Africa, when they were being tormented, they were being treated poorly and bad, right? When you're not allowed to live your life freely, in all the times that you walk in, just think about it this way: you think that you have a right to walk into a store, but somebody is following you around every time you go there. So a police officer pulls you over and they treat you like a criminal when they could just have a conversation with you, right? All these types of things add to the stress that you have every day. And so when you know that someone like George Floyd was murdered, or Ahmaud Arbery, and all these other things that were going on, and you sit there and then you have somebody in your face almost doing those same types of things, it brings up something in you. And it makes you feel a certain way of, and that's about safety, right? There's a fear that you may have. And you know that when you have anxiety in the Black community, or there's stress that's going on, it adds to the types of things. We already have short lifespans because of the things that have been happening in our community. And then you add to that added stress of just living while Black.
Mm-hmm. Being a target while Black. And Dr. Smith, earlier you mentioned secondary trauma. Can you help us to understand what that means?
When we talk about secondary trauma, we're basically talking about the trauma that we kind of experience via someone else versus from hearing their story of trauma, from helping them navigate through their trauma. But it's basically trauma that you hear about or you experience via someone else. And that's the secondary trauma. But, you know, being in America now, most people, a lot of people are experiencing a lot of trauma firsthand. If you are going out and you've been, you know, disenfranchised for various reasons, that's traumatic for a lot of folks. Having PTSD, you know, is no longer something that we thought, oh, only the vets can have PTSD. Yes, individuals who are involved in violence and things of that nature can develop PTSD. But you think about the racial trauma and those who are receiving that kind of trauma consistently, you know, they can easily move over into other spaces and have other mental health issues.
So go ahead, Aisha.
Oh, no. I was just thinking that I know that's an argument that a lot of people make, is that when it comes to Black people, and when I say a lot of people, I mean white people, they make the argument that when it comes to Black people, you know, we're killing ourselves. And so why do we seem so concerned about
So
everything?
You know what? I think
I
we should
hate that
start with
statement.
both of
So I hate that statement so wholeheartedly, right? You know, we need to be on platforms screaming out that Black people don't kill themselves no more than white people, Asian people, anybody else. We might, you know, we might have a you know, a little bit more of a percentage, you know, one or
Yeah.
two higher or whatever have you. But when you look at who's killing whom, right? But you want to, again, it's those things, those messages that keep going out there that stereotype Black people and make people feel like, oh, they're the ones out there harming one another. There's Black on Black crime. Well, hell, there's white on white crime.
Mhm.
And there's Asian on Asian crime, and there's Hispanic on Hispanic crime, and there are all these things going on. So there's nobody who's immune to not hurting themselves. It's all about proxemics, right? And so what you should be worried about, and what they don't worry about, is, and that's why they continue to keep this narrative. And again, it is some way of a distraction, because, you know, if Black people were going into white communities killing people, you would see a difference.
We don't
If
even
you
have to
saw
say
Black
it.
people buying guns the way that white people are buying guns, you would see differences that go on. I am actually an advocate for folks going out and getting weaponry.
So am I.
Well, and so I've said, I think this was a past show we talked about me. I like to go to the gun range. It's fun. It's you know, therapeutic.
What's
for
wrong
me.
with owning a gun
But
and being
when
responsible?
when I go, I am often the only Black woman there.
I bet
There are
you are.
plenty of white guys, and they have a lot more than pistols.
There was a
Okay?
rise in
They
terms
got
of
all
people who were
kind of
getting their
stuff.
license and stuff like that right around the time that George Floyd was murdered, because everybody was wondering what this racial tension was. But I'm telling you right now, you want to see policy change? Start doing things differently.
Gotcha.
Start having folks have the right to be able to conceal and carry weapons. And you'll see how quickly these NRA people start to change their tune about who and who can't. You know what the funny thing about the NRA is? They didn't even let guns into their own convention a week or so ago.
Of course not.
Really?
So wait a
Of
minute.
course not.
So when you think about these things, how ironic is that, right? How absolutely hypocritical is that?
Yeah. But what I heard also from Dr. Aisha, you know, I mean, it's a hazard sometimes living and being in the hood. You know, and we're not only looking out for someone who doesn't look like us. But
Mhm.
also, the person, like I mentioned earlier in the show, the person pulling the trigger sometimes is who looks just like us, and they're Black, and we happen to be the victims of the bullet. But oftentimes we are outraged, when the person.
Again, so I think a lot of that has to do with helping people have some good home training, right? You get angry at somebody because they stole your drugs or they on your street corner or whatever have you. You
Oh, I
need to
agree.
put that in check. You need
Yeah,
to just put that in check.
we need to learn some.
You're gonna be angry at somebody and shoot somebody for that, and if you get caught, you're going to jail for a long time because you couldn't put in check your anger.
Yeah, I agree. We need to learn some conflict management skills. All these shootings I see on the news, it's all about somebody got into a beef, an argument, and they
Right.
Over
decided to go get their
foolishness.
gun and they started spraying, and some innocent people got shot.
Innocent people, yeah.
But Dr. Smith, what Aisha brought up, sometimes we get it from every angle, and how are we supposed to handle all of that trauma and feeling targeted by a number of people that are out there? What's the toll that takes on the average Black person?
I think it takes a big toll on us. We get to the point that we just get tired, and I think we were saying that a few years ago. I'm just exhausted. I'm just tired. And when people said that, the reality of it is I understood because I was just tired as well. You get to a point that you're just tired, but we can't stay in that place of just being tired. We have to do what we know to do and continuously to move forward and try to make this a better place, not just for ourselves, but we have children, we have nieces, we have nephews, we have a younger generation that's still coming. So unfortunately, yes, we're tired, but we just can't afford to stay tired and do nothing about it. And public policy is a great way. Politics is local. So we have to get involved in our politics on a local level, state level, and on federal level and have a voice. We have to collaborate with each other and make sure that we're voting for individuals who will advance the agenda for humanity.
I like that. So do you all think that the news puts maybe too many details out there? That's what when I think about my kids watching or even walking past the TV when the news is on,
I'm
seeing
muted.
dead
I
bodies,
was a communications
getting the
major.
steps for okay, do this, and that, and that's how you kill someone.
Right.
Like,
Well, in undergrad, I was a communications major, and there was something that was said about why news is the way it is. If it bleeds, it leads.
Radio.
I've
And
never
so
heard
they
that.
want you to believe
I've heard
that
that.
you all want to know this information, and they
Mhm.
keep you in that. So it's also a fair mechanism too, right? To keep people in check in some regards there too. But there are so many things that are harmful with media, especially when it comes to how they kind of portray various communities, right? They do things that are very harmful that add to the stereotypical things that people believe about certain people and communities. And so the news is generated to put out all of this negative stuff that's happening in the world, and then have like a 5-minute interest story before they close out, right? On purpose. And it keeps them, I guess,
There's
paid.
money.
Yeah,
There's
it
money
keeps them
flowing.
paid.
So what I want to talk about now, how do we heal from all of this? The Black folks in the Black community. I mean, we're getting it from all angles. We got the white folks traveling across state lines. Their mama driving a 17-year-old across state lines to go shoot some folks. We got the ones who are planning it. And then the ones who just one day goes and buy a gun.
And then get off because the judicial system doesn't support. Like, if we always say this, right? If a Black mama have driven her kid
Okay.
over across state
I have a
lines,
17-year-old, so if I drive her over the state line
you would have been
to
under the
kill
jail.
someone,
You would have been under the jail,
To kill
right?
somebody.
I think about it. There's so many different things. The trauma of this, right? You have a person, again, the mass shooting today. The person's still alive. I don't know who they look like, what they are. I can imagine,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But I would tell you that when you go into a community and the Black person who's not armed comes out dead, and the person who goes in and shoots 19 people, 20 people, whoever, whatever, 10 people can walk away or get a sandwich or
Yeah.
Coke.
It's all
You know,
unfair, and I
those
think it's
things, that's a message being sent as well,
yes
right?
breeding
Whose
some of
life
that
really
fear.
matters?
Hmm.
You know, if the police can not be angry at a person who just killed 25 people,
Right. And not even stomp on him.
but mad at
Like the,
right, and then but
and
mad
do a
at
little
somebody who's just
stomping.
trying to sell a cigarette.
Yeah, yeah. And don't forget, they failed to go into the school when the little, mostly Hispanic kids were being shot up, by
Mm.
somebody. They all stood outside. But Dr. Smith, how do we heal in the Black community? That's the $1 million question right there.
It truly is a $1 million question. But I do think about the institution of the family. Although, we've always talked about the family being intact and making sure that we nurture the Black family. I think that's important. When that was happening in the past and the Black family was intact, we were nurturing the Black family. We still saw, lynchings. There were still things that happened that
Yeah,
were just,
yeah.
racial trauma, racial violence. It just still happened. But in this day and time now, we still have to have that conversation about where is the family, where where are the parents, who's instructing, who's providing, who's role modeling for these individuals at home. And so, how do we begin to heal? We begin with the family unit. We begin reconstructing the family. And unfortunately, but yet fortunately, many families may need guidance. They may need counseling. They may need instruction on healing and talk about what happened with grandmama, granddaddy, what happened years ago. How did we get here to America? Just begin to talk about those things. And when we got here, what happened? And talk about it in a free manner and not in a manner necessarily from hate or from angry or not letting anything go, but talking about it from a place that allows you to unpack your stuff and to heal. So, looking at the institution of family, but also looking at the institution of education. What are we teaching our kids and our youth in school? How are we teaching them conflict resolution skills? How are we teaching them how to advocate for themselves when they feel disenfranchised, but not shoot up or not get upset and angry and walk away? And also, we have to talk about, for me now, maybe not for other people, we have to talk about the aspect of spirituality. Where are we in spirituality? Now, I'm not saying you have to believe in one thing and you have to have one practice. I have my own faith of what I believe in, and that's okay. But we have to talk about who, and what are we believing in? What are we worshiping that allows us to not have a conscience? And
Gotcha.
so, family, spirituality, and education, those, I would say, the three things that we need to give address to, as well as public policy, when we talk about healing. And then lastly, we talk about healing in the Black community. We have to again talk about mental health and getting help for mental health, and normalizing that and saying that it's okay to get help. There are plenty of therapists out there who are brown and Black and brown
Amen.
skin, can identify who can help. But if you choose to go to another therapist who's not of color, that's fine too.
Yep.
But my point is, how do we get to the point that we say, hey, it's okay to get help? It's okay to talk about your mental health. It doesn't mean you're a crazy person, and we got to talk about terminology, because sometimes we can say, oh, they're just crazy. They've always been like that. Or, just go pray about it.
Yeah.
We got to deal with mental health.
Yeah, we need to normalize going to see a therapist in the Black community. Absolutely. And Dr. Butler, you're going to have the final word. What can we do to heal the Black community? What type of things do you suggest?
We have to go back to our roots. We are a collectivistic society of people. We love one another. We trust one another. We lift one another up. We have to remember our resiliency. Through it
Mhm.
all, we still here.
Yeah.
And so I believe the things that Dr. Smith has spoken about are really essential in terms of helping us on the day to day.
I agree.
But we have to start building people up. We need to have support systems. We need to understand that we trust one another. We have to stop all this hatred of one another through the types of things that we do to hurt one another, right? Not to harm them or to kill them, but this like this jealousy or this whatever it is that we do there's one upmanship, there's all these things like keeping up with the Joneses and all these different things that we do in our community, right? We follow the leader, right? We have all these big lashes on because we follow somebody who told us that we need to wear these lashes, right?
And they just keep
And,
getting bigger.
say it
Just
again.
like the
I said
BBLs.
they just keep getting bigger.
They keep getting bigger and bigger, right? And so finding your individuality, but at the same time, understanding the collectivistic side of who we are as a people and start to love on each other and lift each other up, help people, right? When you see somebody who is hurting, walk them over to a counselor. Don't tell them that they're crazy, so to speak, but finding ways to show people that you care and then finding your support systems. One of the things during the pandemic that I was able to find was a support system of my brothers who would get together and communicate and talk that can lift us up so that you don't feel like there's something that's happening to you, that you're going kind of out of sorts. Because you can look at your brother. I can call Harrison and I can say to him, hey, what's going on? This happened to me today. Like when he sent the email earlier today about what happened with his students at his university, I was
Don't mention
like,
it.
I was like, I've been there. I've seen that. I've had people say stuff like that.
Me
And
too.
so it normalizes it. So you don't think that you're the only one who's going through this, right? And so we
Yeah.
just have to talk. The difficult dialogues that we're talking about having with folks in the white community, we're also talking about having them internally as well. We just have
Amen.
to be able to do better. And we have to be the ones who help make this thing happen, this change. And I think that's happening. That's one of the reasons why I think some of this stuff is happening in the world, right? Because people are starting to wake up, right? We're starting to see people like Stacey Abrams and others get into office, right? And so there's a fear factor to when you see this type of success happening. You all know, you're in Georgia. You know what happened after Warnock and all those other folks got into
Oh, yeah.
office. People started to lose their mind, right? And so they feel that they're losing something. They can't be gaining something from the fact that they have cultural diversity in their midst. They're losing something in their mind, right? And so they don't see the fact that leaders can be from different cultural backgrounds or have different types of interests, intersectionalities, love who they love. They don't see that as a benefit because they've been told all their life that they're better than. And so we
Thank
have to kind of look at that and dismantle all of that. We have to decolonize so much of what's happening in the world and let people recognize that, listen, love me for me. And if I do something that hurts you or harms you, then you have a beef with me. But if I done nothing to you, let's work this out. Let's do something. Let's get it together
Absolutely.
and move on.
Dr. Aisha?
Wonderful. Yeah. So I know we could go on and on, but
Yep.
we have like 40 more seconds. So I want the
Well,
viewers to know where they can find you. Dr. Smith, where can people find you if they want to get in contact with you after the show?
After the show, if they want to get in contact with me, they can email me at president@amca.org. Or you can go to my website, my personal business website, www.bscg.co.
Thank you. What about you, Dr. Butler?
they can reach me on Twitter at SKBUTLER, SKBUTLER. So it's at SK Butler. And they can also, at this point, Google me. I'm all over the place. So,
Hey, I like that. Google
All
me.
right. That's a great thing. I'm gonna start using that. How can I contact you? Google me. Well, guys, thank you
but
for coming on our show. I have really enjoyed
you.
today's conversation, hearing from two experts, two presidents in premier counseling organizations, Dr. Beverly Smith and Dr. Kent Butler. I want to also remind the audience that Dr. Aisha and I, we're going to be broadcasting live every Thursday evening at 7:00 p.m. And we will see you guys next week. Take care.
all right. Thank you.